another day begins. Okay, let's do this. Hello friends, and welcome back to Drenched in Wonder Cannabis Conversations. We are at day 12, holy moly, day 12 of 25, at least 25, which means I'm about to cross over the halfway point. And I've said it before, I know, but the deeper I dive into this conversation, the more I realize that it's just so important to actually have it. And I love that we exist in a time where this is possible via technology, via podcasts and via video. And it's really amazing and kind of mind-blowing. And, the people who have already reached out to me, it's a really special thing. And it's not necessarily the conversation that I want to be having forever. I do intend absolutely to move on to other conversations. But this one, right now, feels right. And I'm so glad to have you with me, whether you're watching right now or you are listening via a podcast. Without you, I'm just some guy speaking into a microphone. So grateful for you, friends. Now, today's topic, or more today's story, it's a pretty big one, friends. And I've been kind of not exactly procrastinating it because I've always known that sharing this story was a really important part of this conversation. But finding the right time to share it. If you've listened to any of the other episodes so far, then I dare say, that my approach to cannabis and the approach that I recommend everyone take to cannabis is one of respect. Respect seems to be like the recurring theme because, as we've discussed, we know it's not as simple as cannabis is harmless or harmful. It's both in a way, and of course it varies from person to person. And friends, the story that I'm going to share with you today, even though it talks about this experience that I had while on cannabis, that for lack of a better word, I'll just call supremely undesirable. I also want to make it clear from the start that it wasn't the cannabis to blame. It was absolutely my choice. All right, so let's get comfortable, and I'm going to tell you the story as best I can. So this was about a year after I'd first tried cannabis, and I had found this kind of next level of just creativity and kind of daily inspiration, and I'd found that it makes every part of my life better. I was basically on top of the world, and I was thinking in big ways, and I was just so excited for what was coming next in life. My relationship was improving, my financial situation was improving, my general happiness was improving, my confidence was improving, everything was improving. And as you know, before I tried cannabis for the first time, I was very much against it. And, then I tried it and I was like, wow, this is actually a really, really lovely thing. I've been taught the wrong thing. I could have used this much sooner, and my eyes were open, and cannabis seemed to make everything in my life legitimately better. And so as a result, I just kind of totally owned the fact that I'd been wrong about cannabis. In the year that I'd been using it, I'd basically only had positive impact. So in a way, I kind of believed that that was all that existed, like there's no limit to how much good this can add to my life. There's no limit to how high I can go and still find magic and wonder and just so much benefit. And that was the mindset that I was in. I'd found this thing, I'd figured it out, life was on an upward trajectory, nothing could harm me. I was confident and I was making better choices and I was eating well and I was exercising, and it was just like this whole life thing, I've just nailed it. And this one afternoon, I'd been working really hard on this new business plan. This was a big idea, and it was going to require offices and staff and a lot of capital to get started. But I also just believed in it, and I saw it so clearly. I knew I could do it. And I finished the business plan. It had taken weeks, and I'd mapped out all the finances. I'd mapped out the vibe. I mapped out like the color of the walls, and I was just so excited about it. And I'd been working hard for numerous weeks, and having finished the business plan that afternoon, I was kind of like, you know what? I think I've earned just a little unwind. So I messaged my friend. It was the same friend whose place I went to experience cannabis for the very first time. And I messaged him just to see if he was free that particular night. We hadn't hung out for a while, and I suggested maybe I come over, we can have a little weed, we can maybe watch a movie, get some takeaway. He was in, and I drove to his place, and he'd already made a start by the time I got there, and the room was kind of smoky already. By that point, I was vaporizing, and I hadn't smoked in quite some time. But it was kind of like why not? It's there, and I haven't actually smoked in a while. That could be fun. By this point, I'd built up a fair bit of confidence with cannabis. I knew what to expect. And so I chose to go a little further. I took the amount that I'd normally smoke in a single sitting and basically doubled it. Cannabis users will sometimes talk about this tightening of the chest that happens, particularly when smoking. I don't find this happens so much with vaporizing, though sometimes it does. But when this happens, this tightening of the chest, this for me is a sign that a bigger than usual high might be on the way. And it was like, oh, okay, this could be a big one. We were discussing what to do. Are we going to watch a movie? Are we going to go out? And at the time, I was really enjoying watching films while high. Films that I previously loved, films that I'd never seen before, even for like one's favorite film. It's like you see it with a new insight, you see it with new eyes. And so diving into films while high was and is just such a fun thing. And I had this idea. I'd seen this poster in the cinema for this rather like intense, kind of chilling looking film. And I said to my friend, oh, why don't we watch a scary movie? So you can probably kind of see what's coming here. This is a story that I go into detail in the book, but I'm going to keep going. So we ordered some pizzas, and my friend downloaded the film illegally, most certainly, and we were ready to go within 30 minutes or so. And we both decided to ingest more cannabis before starting this film. The amount that I'd had prior, which was already like twice the amount that I normally would, I basically had that same amount again. So I feel it's safe to say that this is probably the highest that I had ever been at that point. So the film began, and I feel like we were both just like nervously excited about what was coming next. And the pizza was delicious. And I remember thinking, gosh, this film's taking a little while to kind of get into it. And even my friend was like, is something going to happen soon? And I was like, no, just wait. They're building up to something. And it turns out they were. As I mentioned, I do talk about the film and the scene in the book. But suffice to say, friends, that things got pretty messed up pretty quickly. When I say things got pretty messed up, our imagination no doubt conjures certain things. And films, horror films and suspense films, I've seen plenty of them in my time, and I know that films are made by filmmakers, and the people are not real on the screen. They are played by actors, and the whole thing is directed by a director, written by a screenwriter, and I know all that. And I've explained in previous episodes how cannabis, it kind of puts me in this childlike creative state. In this place, in this kind of mind, I saw this scene happen in which a young woman was killed, and I had a reaction to it. It was this shock moment, and something kind of jolted within me. And quite quickly, I realized something's not right here. Something like, I remember I was starting to shake a little bit, and the film was still going, and I was kind of just like, what is happening here? And it's like this switch was flicked, and my mind was suddenly like ahead of me in a way, and I couldn't quite catch up to it. At the same time, my mind was just constantly replaying this scene. I looked over at my friend, and he was fine. He was watching the film, and I tried to kind of shake it off and go, no, you're fine. Everything's good. And I went back to the film. Probably not a great idea because it only got worse. And I realized that it wasn't stopping. And then I said to my friend, can we stop? And he realized what was going on, and he's like, oh, of course. I suggested that we put on a different film, and hopefully that would kind of bring me out of it. It was a Pixar film that we went to next, and it was a significant improvement in atmosphere, needless to say, but it didn't work. And I remember before the very first time that I tried cannabis, I looked up how to stop a high, and it seemed that there was no sure way to do that. But I remember seeing on a forum comment somewhere that someone had recommended just to jump in the shower and listen to music. So I jumped in the shower, and that helped. And then I came back and I listened to music, and then I jumped in the shower again, and I kind of repeated that process like 5 times, and it did help. But I then came to see that this wasn't actually stopping. I called my partner at the time and she came to pick me up. And, the next morning, I'd hoped that I'd wake up and just be, okay, good. That was just a terrible freaking nightmare. But I didn't actually sleep at all that night. Went to the doctor and she prescribed me Valium. And that was that. And every day, like I woke up just immediately checking in. Is this gone? Is this over? And then like, no, it's not. It's still here. All the happiness had just disappeared. And I kind of realized I can't work like this. I can't do much like this at all. I temporarily closed down the dance school that I was running and just kind of set about trying to get back to myself. And very, very gradually, with the help of numerous people, including a therapist, and adding in new tools into my life, including meditation, including yoga on a daily basis, I gradually did. I gradually came back. It took 6 months to kind of come back to myself. And throughout that whole time, I didn't have any cannabis whatsoever. You see what I mean when I say I don't blame the cannabis, and I absolutely don't, because cannabis is a plant, let's be honest. And again, I suggested the film. I suggested that specific film, and I chose to go significantly higher than I had ever been up to that point. So it's on me. And ultimately, this experience, it paved the way for my mindset now around cannabis. And of course, I didn't have the full picture on cannabis. I didn't have the education that I needed. If I had, that situation simply wouldn't have occurred. I would have chosen a different film, or I would have chosen not to go so high. And of course, we can have reactions to things without cannabis. If I had seen that film for the first time not high, I might have had a challenging reaction to that. I don't know. But cannabis enhances experience. It makes them more vivid, more real. And coming at from the perspective of this kind of like childlike place, you can see how it messed me up for a time. And, part of me wanted to blame the filmmakers as well. This material shouldn't exist in the world. But no, I don't. They succeeded in delivering on their promise to scare the shit out of the viewer. I did eventually come back to cannabis, but I needed to find my way back without it. And once I felt that I'd kind of come back to myself, then I realized something was missing from my life. I remembered the good, and I remembered the afternoon adventures, and I remembered just the wonder and the joy of it all. And eventually, with a great deal of care and a great deal of respect, I came back to it. And obviously, my entire approach to cannabis shifted dramatically. Friends, the last thing that I want to do is to scare anyone around cannabis. And I've said that numerous times because you know how I feel about this plant. You know how I feel about what it can offer us. And you see why I'm constantly talking about responsible, balanced use. Not to say that anyone would make the same kind of foolish choice that I would, but I didn't know that that could happen. And I was 28 at the time. What would that have looked like if I was 18 or if I was 16? I think the other thing is that I suffered in silence for a time there. I did have support, of course, but I was still kind of stuck in the stigma. I hadn't told my parents at that point. I hadn't told most of my friends. And my belief was that now any objection around cannabis had now been proven right, And so I was kind of stuck in this little shameful bubble of my own making. And it was terrible, of course. But now, where are we now? It's 11 years since that happened. And, as we look back on those moments of adversity or challenge or whatever we'd call it, we see that they're the transformative moments. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we end up finding gratitude for that. Now, before I go down that particular path, I'm going to wrap up because this is already probably a pretty long episode. But friends, I just want to say thank you for listening, for being here, whether you're listening or watching. This is a really important side of the conversation to have. And please don't let it deter you from exploring this wonderful, wonderful thing. And again, education, right? We all know not to drink an entire bottle of vodka in a night. Well, most of us do. We've had that education. And fingers crossed, education is better now. But again, this is why I feel legalization is so important. I don't even know what the cannabis was that we had that night. But in any case, if we keep things stigmatized, if we keep things in the shadows, if we keep things surrounded by some measure of shame, we're doing us all a disservice, particularly younger people. They're talking about it. They're probably doing it. And like I've said, I believe cannabis to be such a good thing. I do genuinely believe the potential exists for cannabis to help everyone in some way, but in a balanced, well-informed way, free of shame, free of the stigma, and with a tremendous amount of respect. Thank you for joining me for this episode, friends. As you can tell, no doubt, this was a really important one to share, and it's difficult to communicate the true depth of that experience. Perhaps that's a good thing, but I'm glad to share it. I hope it helps. And of course, if you'd like to read a little deeper into the story, check out the book, drenchedinwonder.com. And in the next episode, we're going to lighten the tone just a tad, and I'm going to talk about the book, some of the challenges that I faced, some of the joys that I faced of bringing a non-conventional book to the world for the first time. I'll look forward to diving in with you, friends. Thank you again for joining me. Be safe, be smart. I'll see you soon.